really struggling too hard. Honestly, if I didn't get a test, I probably would have assumed I just got a cold. But anyways, let's hope it remains this way and it isn't going to get worse from here. One nice advantage actually of streaming, I actually thought I was only complaining starting at like late Saturday, but a couple of viewers reached out to me and they were like, hey Loco, you were actually already complaining on Friday that you had a bit of an itchy throat and that you weren't feeling so great. So I was like, oh, I thought Saturday night was like, you know, when I was starting to feel a little bit shaky, but turns out it was a little bit sooner than that. I guess that's an advantage of live streaming.
Alright, I have no idea why my regular mic isn't working.
Solar at this point hasn't seen the Battlecruiser.
I just gave up on it.
But, I mean,
For the tour to Watopia.
If it was a benchy opener or say
We have about 9 minutes to warm up now.
Alright, there's a little beep. If this would have been a benchy
Some of my fans
or
too.
whatever, it would have already shown itself. Just because those units take far less long to produce. So even though Solar hadn't seen that it was a Battlecruiser start here, he could still put one together. Hellions, oddly enough, on idle, not trying to jump into the third base. I would have liked to see that. Okay, now they're finally moving forward. I guess Solar had already split up the queens. This is something that the Zerg players have gotten very good at, right? So rather than just simply using all of the queens to try and deflect one big unit in the main base and then losing a lot of units at the third, usually Zerg players are very good at splitting up the units. That being said, it looks like these Hellions right now on the right side of the map have found, if they go right now, I think they have found a way to get some work in. Alright, let's see. Yep, one Overlord missing on the right side of the map. 7 drones end up going down. If it's going to go at the cost of all of these Hellions, though. Okay, 9 drones in total. Yeah. I never like those traits. Like, it looks good, right? Because, I mean, obviously the Hellions aren't very helpful here going forward. But the problem is that, I mean, you're not going to get those...
I have no idea how the mic's going to work now because they're in my ears. But we shall see. I guess if it's good enough, I'll drop the blue snowball. I just don't have to work it out. Keep using these Poly High G4 cheap headphones from Amazon. Just cheap sports wireless headphones so I can dedicate them to the streaming station.
Honestly, yeah, 13 drones is really the best he's going to get, right? Honestly, that's already a little bit too much. Maybe that's the difference, right? So say, for example, this would have been Sarah play. I find it hard to believe Sarah would lose 13 drones. Sarah would probably lose like 5. And then all of a sudden, those builds seem kind of silly. Probably also one of the reasons why people tend to not open up Battlecruiser Hellion against him. Anyways, this could be nice. This could be really nice for Hero Marine. Okay. Jimmy right there, barely not getting the evacuation he was hoping for, but Hatchery will stay alive for the time being. I like this. A couple of Hellions, sorry, a couple of Marines right there dropped into the little jump-up pad. Sadly, right now they've lost high ground vision, so they will get poked to death right there by the Queens. A lot of the epic games on Hardwire of TVZ that I've seen are Terran players focusing on mech. Hero Marine, of course, not really a mech kind of guy. Does snipe the 5th base as well. Nicely done here. Not really a mech kind of player. So he's focusing right here on a biological army instead. I mean, his nickname is literally Hero Marine.
The goal today for the Tour of Watopia is to keep it under 2 watts per kilogram, so under 170 watts-ish. It's flat route, and my club has a tour of we're up the Alp tomorrow, and we got a tour up the Alp on Friday with the Tour of Watopia again, so want to keep it easy.
Yeah, lurkers are so much better. I'm never too keen on Hydras in general. Never really seems to work out very well. Now, one advantage, of course, of Hydras is that they do outrange Widow Mines when they are fully upgraded. So that's one of the reasons why we do oftentimes see them still mixed in against these Widow Mine-based armies. Okay. The drops over here getting some work done as well. Looks like the Bio Army here did get cleaned up somewhat here on the left side of the map. Yeah, the majority of that Bio Army looks like it was killed right there by the Banelings. A couple of drones going down as well, though, and Hero Marine still is looking ridiculously strong. 4th base is quite late, so he was definitely putting a lot of eggs in that basket. Oh my god, really? I'm actually going to back up here for just a second. So even though he knew that the medevac was there, yeah, the Drilling Boy upgrade is very fast, right? Wait, they don't even have it yet. Oh my god, really? Alright, well that was a little bit sloppy right there by Solar. Yeah, Drilling Claw starts up right now. I expected that to already be finished. That would at the very least explain why Solar got caught off guard so bad, but I guess he was busy looking at something else. And then suddenly, he ends up losing 39 drones in this game in total. It's been a few here, a few there. Very nice work here by the German Terran player. The one accidental swarm host. The Koreans refuse to rebind the hotkey for that unit. It's to do with their Queen Inject method. They use this Queen Inject method that allows them to like inject like 5 dozen bases in like under half a second. 5 dozen might be a bit much, but they can literally inject like a dozen bases in under a second. It's really fast. The problem is if you fat finger your hotkey right there for a second, you do accidentally make that one swarm host. Alright, so Hive Tech is here, but you can see Solar sticking around on Hydroling Bane. He's now adding on Vipers. Hero Marine here, just going for the good old standard Marine Marauder Medevac Mine. There is a Zergling counterattack over here, but it looks like the Battlecruiser is still happy to help out with the base defense. Okay, Zerglings right here, split off from the pack.
It could be that I updated to macOS 12.4 this morning, whatever the latest one is, like Monterey. So maybe I have an issue with that. Usually I don't worry about it in stuff great, but maybe I should for this. I don't have a computer to dedicate just to streaming. One day, maybe. I actually have to earn some money. It doesn't earn me any money yet. Just lets me write off bikes. So I link to stuff that makes some money on Amazon.
Well, the Zerg side of the map in this case, but he does it against Terran, he does it against Protoss as well. Love this positioning, by the way, here for Terran. We'll probably see a scan here. Yep. Get rid of that creep tumor. It's going to take a little bit of time until all of that creep disappears, but Liberators are now going to try and stress the multitasking here with the Zerg even more. This is not something that the Terran really has to look at, so he can continue focusing on dealing damage wherever he can, wait for the creep to disappear, push forward, try and not take a bailing to the face, though. Okay, Marauders there in the front, Marines mostly running. Decent trait right there for Hero Marine once again. Hero Marine not adding on a 5th command center, so notice the stylistic difference right here to, for example, Maru, right? Maru at this stage in the game would probably already be sitting at, like, alright, there we go. The Iron Bank, right? He would add on additional command centers as well. Hero Marine focusing on more pressure here instead. There's the ranged upgrade for those lurkers coming up. Once those are out, though, the tempo here can easily shift. So
I'll wait until like a minute before to join. That way, actually, the mileage actually counts here for the warm-up, as opposed to just sitting and spinning the gates, which doesn't count. Gotta use all the tricks to hit the 100,000K. Sorry, 10,000K, 100,000 meters per for the year.
Going for the weapons upgrade first. Alright, so the age of the Marines and the Marauders is over. Long live the Ghost. Every Terran player's most favorite MOBA unit. They've got every ability they need, dude. They've got Cloak, they've got Snipe, they've got EMP, they even have an ulti. With those nukes. We don't see their ulti used that often, but still cool. Wouldn't be surprised to see it mixed in here. Alright, Marauders once again in the front. Is there enough, though, for the Zerg player to push through this? Honestly, the Zerg army is looking absolutely massive. And despite that choke point there, yeah, Solar takes a decisive victory. That Zerg eco here has been quite good for quite some time. And despite the fact that he did lose 46 workers in this game so far, right now he's starting to finally catch a little bit of an advantage. Can he ride the wave home, though? That's the question. I don't think so, right? There's 12 Marines being produced right here, every single production structure, or every single production cycle, rather. Good moves right there by Hero Marine. Fighting off creep, of course, very hard, but the 5th command center there did end up going down. Planetary Fortress did not finish. That being said, Gabe, of course, did add on a 2nd command center as well when he built the 5th one. So, I guess 5th and a 6th at the same time. So he's going to be able to morph an orbital, or move an orbital right here towards that newly acquired base. This does leave it more susceptible, of course, to lurkers, as well as, like, Ling Bane run-bys and all that. Speaking of which, lurkers finally coming up. 15 minutes into the game. Alright. So one way in which you can defend this base is just by being in your opponent's face the entire time, right? I wouldn't mind seeing like a little wall off or something along those lines over there, or maybe even another command center over here, and then morph that one into a planetary fortress. 2 Marauders and 2 Marines inside of a plane. It's a very, very easy to harass base, though. You can run in banelings from several different angles here. Definitely an opportunity right there for Solar. Hello, what's this? Okay, a couple of free units right here. Good guy, Solar. Apparently felt a little bit too good after taking that small lead. Nidus network is coming up here. Okay, nice. There's already an Overseer inside of the main base. That Overseer, it's got like 17 eyes. It's gonna be able to, give him vision, I suppose, for where he wants to put down those Nidus worms, and this is starting to hurt now. Okay, so Hero Marine in the driver's seat of this game for the first, I would say, 14 minutes. Most Zerg players would crumble under the pressure. So far, not Solar. Ooh, good snipes. Very nice snipes. Zerg is, at this point, maxed out, but he needs to be careful, yeah. Hero Marine right now inviting his opponent off creep. Nidus Worm goes up in the main base. I love it. Hero Marine currently has all of his attention right here on the Zerg side of the map. Is he not paying attention? Okay, now he's seen it, but, yeah, what are you going to do about it at this point? Okay, Lurkers in the main base. This is where the production of the Terran player is mostly still coming from. But this is going to be one of those very annoying moves to clean up. At the same time, small hit squad of units in the bottom right-hand corner, based on the left-hand side, normally one of the Terran expos, taken here by the Zerg. Okay, Zerg going in for what seems to be another big counterattack. That does mean that the bases at home, okay, are indeed vulnerable. Action all over the map right now. Hero Marine still decides to push forward. This is a very dangerous move. Obviously, it takes about a half minute to a minute or so until all that creep is gone, so now you're moving deep onto the creep, and that's where those banelings are going to have a much easier time. Zerglings dealing a lot of damage. That base already losing 17 workers. I don't know about the Planetary Fortress, man. If you don't repair it up in time, yeah, it's going to deal a lot of damage. At the same time, the Bio Army pushing forward. Baneling Nest goes down. Nidus Worm, I mean, yeah, it's going to be a one-way street, I guess, but those lurkers weren't planning on coming home.
So I'm doing the 38K version of this ride today.
Zerg dealing so much damage, picking up the units as they pull out of those production structures. At the same time,
I don't think you can hear me at all. I think this microphones are working very well, based on the noise, but we'll try. Anyways, for today.
I can't believe Hero Marine decided to go that deep into the creep. Nicely done right here by the German Terran. Something very dangerous, though. Yeah, he's losing a lot of units here, right? Like, we're bleeding out a lot of those Terran big hitters. Goes, though, I mean, they're heavy hitters. Getting a lot of work in. And obviously, the main base is where all of the important tech right here for the Zerg player is, right? So he's already adding on a new spawning pool. He's added on a new Baneling's nest right here on the left side of the map, too. Hero Marine evacuating the main base entirely, but he's also getting rid of his opponent's main. Hero Marine hasn't seen his base right here on the left side of the map. That's a big one, actually. If he would have seen that one, he would have certainly sent some units in that direction, but maybe a bit of a miscalculation right there on the side of the Terran. He is moving in the bottom right, though. Dealing a lot of damage over there. Command centers and barracks and a couple of factories trying to reposition themselves in the middle of the map. Hive at this point is gone. One hero drone with a peace offering will be brutally murdered as well. 5 minerals is not going to cut it right there, Solar. No truce for you, my man. In the meantime, though, okay, a couple of drones have made their way towards the other side of the map. It looks like hatcheries are now being made inside of the main base right here of the Terran. Solar probably a little bit concerned to run out of resources here, to run out of larva. One of the production resources for the Zerg, of course. Okay, that's a lot of siege tanks, though. I love that Hero Marine was playing Widow Mines earlier, but has now gone, yeah, he's gone ahead and made a huge siege tank army. He's making a new command center somewhere out on the map as well. Couple of Zerglings over here dealing some damage. Looks like the orbital command right there on the left.
170 watts is about the max I want to hit today. Don't want to go over that.
Army in the bottom right corner.
Keep it nice and easy.
Fingering one of his own hotkeys as well.
So maybe I can go below 60 minutes. Tell me out tomorrow or maybe Friday. Let's see.
Solar at this point 50 supply ahead. But yeah, that's another lurker dead. Nice moves right here by Hero Marine. Hero Marine obviously has units and army and structures, right? Like sprinkled all over the map. So he can't really be surprised right now by the Zerg force. The last drones actually for the Zerg player. No, actually, no, that's not the last of them. There's still like 30 of them out there somewhere. Where'd they even go? I guess there's a couple of drones burrowed over here. A couple of drones in the middle of them. Yeah, okay. This is awkward. Command centers right here next to 2 hatcheries. Solar trying to remake some drones. I don't know where he's planning on sending those workers, though. Hero Marine keeping his head cool, still maneuvering the army around the map. Going after every single one of those Zerg bases. He knows that there's hatcheries inside of his old main. But that's once again, good couple of kills right here. Another spawning pool over here was also produced. Okay, we're going for 2 more spawning pools right next to each other. Not entirely sure if that was necessary. Spawning pool 3 and 4. This looks like the way that like the campaign Zergs, you know, like when you play the Terran campaign and you go up against one of the Zergs. This looks like the way that they build bases. 2 spawning pools, 2 hatcheries right next to each other. Solar secretly an AI. Hello, making a lair over here, probably not ideal. These lurkers are gonna have to run for their lives. Although, well, you know what? That one Reaper over here, I was giggling about it, but it's doing a lot of work, taking a lot of the damage right there, getting healed up by Medevac. Anyways, the hatchery already gone. Zerg trying to hunt down as many of those structures as possible, but obviously the Terran structures can fly. Not a whole lot of anti-air available. 2 random siege tanks and a few Marines. Finding some work. Hero Marine, by the way, not really getting any income of his own either, right? So 27 minerals right here. I think that's just one SCV over here trying to get some sort of work done. Both players, though, still have a bank. At this point, Hero Marine has evened up the supply. Okay, looks like one of the spawning pools was cancelled, and now we're going to go for double bailing nest instead. Double hatchery into double spawning pool into double bailing nest. A new meta. Natural and main base are run out, so apparently Solar's got a long distance mine the mineral fields over at the 3rd base of the Terran player. I guess the 4th base? I don't know. I don't think income is going to be the problem, though. You can see Hero Marine right here still with, well, 2.5k resources in the bank. Just needs supply and production here to get it done. Queen's also moving dangerously far off creep. Alright, is there enough right here for Hero Marine to push this home? Honestly, the Terran army is looking huge. Siege tanks, though, are low in HP. How many do we have? Okay, there's another one. We're at 7 siege tanks in total. 89 Zerglings, but these lings are obviously very well upgraded. Actually, mass upgraded. Okay, he could actually go in. Oh my god, I think he could go. Okay, 1 siege tank there. Still dies to friendly fire. 33 kills, 34, 28, 25. 26. Oh my god, well here we go. Apparently this is the moment that Solar decides to collapse on top of this leftover Terran army. Is there enough right here for the Terran player to hold on? Orbital command over here. Okay, flying, but the siege tanks are now all destroyed. That being said, there's a nice little nuke right over here. Yeah, but those Terran units can chill. There are a couple of banelings over here. He's sniping the banelings. Hero Marine is done messing around. Using snipe right there with those ghosts on the banelings. This is an incredibly close game right now. Solar has spent the last of his money using those production structures inside of his opponent's main base. Once again, though, the Medevac's getting some value in. There's no anti-air available here for the Zerg player at all. So, theoretically speaking, yeah, this should be really good right here for the Terran. This is a crazy endgame. Oh my god. Is there enough? Okay, he once again, yeah, he just kills a little bit and lifts up. Kill a little bit, lift up. At this point, Zerg needs to get a little bit lucky, I guess. If Zerg does not kill those Medevacs, which they're not going to be able to, it means that Hero Marine technically should be able to use this very well. I love this too. Creating a nice little choke point over here for those units. Once again, a few snipes right there. Cleaning up a couple more of those Zerg ground units. Marines inside of the main base of the Zerg, killing whatever they can. GG. Beautiful anti-aim right there for Hero Marine. I was doubting his straight move through the center of the map, but that was beautiful. Well done.
Hi, I'm Carlos from Link Shell. Link is an app for local and remote development on iOS. In our last version, we introduced a new Visual Studio Code integration that will boost your productivity when working from phones or tablets. Let me show you how it works. To start, I'm going to run the code command, passing a dot to open the current file. As you see, we're now in a Visual Studio Code web session. I still have no files yet. To complete the setup, let's install the BlinkFS extension. And easy as that, we have now access to all our local file system, but also to any remote files. I want to point out a few differences between using VS Code inside the browser or inside Blink Shell. Inside Blink, you will see that we have a full screen experience without any browser bars or any other interaction. Blink also gives you an integrated software keyboard optimized for developers with special keys like Control, Alt, or Command, so you can start the command line. And if you cannot live without your Emacs or Vim shortcuts like me, you can also install extension and use the ones you know. Now, let's take a look at remote development. I'm going to be using this Raspberry Pi, but the same applies to any other remote set. Now, this is the Zero model with very limited resources, and I don't want to install a desktop environment just so I can clone it. So let's see how Blink can connect VS Code to it instead. First, I'm going to configure SSH access to my Raspberry Pi. Just going to host, just have it right here. And then, it's just as easy as running code, the host I'm connected to, and the remote path that I'm enabled. And now, I am connected to the same VS Code web session with all of my settings there, but connected to my Raspberry Pi system. So, I want to run my code, but if you remember, there is no terminal in the web version. So what I can do is start one and Blink instead. So connect to a Raspberry Pi, and make the font smaller, and open. Run more code. Oops, looks like I have a small mistake. Oh, save it. Run again. See, we're good to go. I have one more trick to show you. Blink can also connect to your GitHub code spaces to give you a better experience. So here I have Blink documentation, and it looks like something broke out. So let's fire up a code space and figure out what's going on. There. Now, here's the clue. Blink is registered as a desktop app, so we press open, and we'll take it. Let's now figure out what's going on. For that, I'm going to fire up the terminal. I'm going to build. So, extensions and things. Oh, it's open. Soon.
This video is brought to you by the Pros Closet. Stop waiting for your dream bike and start riding it. If you're a fan of the channel, you guys know that we love riding unpaved roads, unimproved roads. Some people even call them gravel roads. But the reasons why might not be completely obvious to everybody. And as much as we love gravel roads, they do have their downside. In this video, I'm going to share with you guys our 5 reasons why we love, but also hate gravel riding. Reason number 1, and this ranks pretty high as one of our reasons why we love gravel riding so much, is traffic, or to be more precise, the lack thereof. So generally speaking, at least here in the West, most of the gravel roads that we ride are Forest Service roads or fire roads. They tend to be less traffic. Part of it is because they go to the middle of nowhere. Also, they're a little bit rougher on your average sedan. And because of this, there are just fewer cars. For us, this makes the riding experience so much better. You can actually talk to other people while you're riding, although you should always be fairly diligent about the potential for oncoming traffic or traffic coming up behind you. This is a lot less anxiety-inducing than riding a narrow, paved, two-way highway with lots of traffic buzzing you constantly. Reason number 2 is that we find it more interesting than road cycling. This is going to be debatable, but generally speaking, in our experience, you see all these disclaimers you have to have as a YouTuber. I just find it more interesting visually and from a scenery perspective to ride up into the mountains or rolling green hills. That's not to say you can't find interesting scenery on a paved road ride, but if you're starting from a city, there's just a lot of like suburban donut to navigate through. Gravel is also interesting in another way, insofar as you're constantly kind of maneuvering around your bike, looking for traction. I feel like on some road rides, you kind of just point the bike straight, you keep turning the pedals in the same kind of locked in position and throwing it home. Whereas on a mixed terrain ride, you're sitting, you're standing, you're unweighting the front because you're going to hit a bump. Maybe you're sliding forward and backwards, trying to gain more traction. It's just a little bit more interesting from a technical aspect. Reason number 3, speaking of that technical aspect, one thing I do love about gravel is that it is less technical than mountain biking. I am not the best mountain biker. When I go on a mountain bike ride, my main focus is not dying. I don't have that skill level yet to relax and take in the scenery. I'm so focused on trying not to wreck on the trail. But that's not the case with gravel. You can kind of zone out a little bit because there's less traffic. It's not so technical. You can take in the scenery rather than worrying about, you know, the super scary exposure off to your side. So for me, it brings in some technical bits of mountain biking to keep it interesting, but not so technical that you can't let your mind wander a little bit and take in the scenery. Reason number 4 that we love riding on gravel is that it just feels a little bit more adventurous. There's always that moment when you cross that threshold where it says pavement ends. Welcome to the great unknown. The sign is slightly foreboding, mixes in a sense of uncertainty that just makes the bike ride more adventurous feeling. That leads into the 5th reason that we love gravel riding, is that it takes you to interesting places. Here in Montana and places where we've ridden in Oregon and Idaho, the gravel roads lead to some cool fishing spots, awesome camping, through state park, just lots of really interesting places to visit by bike. Those are the 5 reasons we love riding on gravel. But I know what you're thinking, in the current day and age with a supply shortage, I can't even get a hold of the gravel bike. What should I do? Well, my friends, let me tell you about today's sponsor, the Pros Closet. I know, despite the name, they've got more than just plastic roadie bikes. Check out this sweet pre-loved Moots Cyclo X with rear suspension, or this super practical Mozzie Special Randor Elite gravel bike with a dyno light and fenders, because that's how you know it's an elite gravel bike. Or this totally baller hand-built tie bike from Engine Cycles. The best part is all these bikes are certified pre-owned, so that means the master mechanics inspect, wash, and replace the parts, so it's in excellent riding condition. It's sort of like a Craigslist, but with baller bikes and way less sketchy. So head on over to the Pros Closet and find the bike of your dreams today, and use the coupon code for free shipping. Thanks to Pros Closet for sponsoring this video. If gravel riding is so great, what could you possibly hate or dislike about it? The first first big dislike is access. We're super fortunate insofar as it's like a 2 or 3 minute ride to some gravel, and not everyone has access like that. Just like mountain biking trails, it's not accessible to everyone geographically. The next thing we hate about gravel rides, or in particular planning a gravel route, is that oftentimes when you're planning a gravel route, it's a big guessing game. You don't know if that gravel road is still there. You don't know if it's an old logging road or service road that hasn't been used in decades, so it's just like a track through some tall grass. Is it public land or private land? Is it public land and someone just put up a no trespassing sign? There's a lot of uncertainty in the whole planning process, which is definitely not for everybody. Contrast that to planning a paved route. You can drive the little virtual car on Google Maps, chances are you can ride your bike there. Thing number 3 that we don't like about riding the gravel is that surfaces vary, and there isn't kind of an agreed kind of nomenclature about what constitutes a gravel ride. For some, a gravel ride is a mix of roads, either paved roads or unpaved roads. For others, it has to include single track, and those kind of proportions between road and trail are different for everyone. Also, some gravel rides, you could ride with a 30mm tire. Some you need a full-on mountain bike tire. So riding someone's random gravel route can be a little bit tricky because you don't know what their expectations are, if they match up with yours. But then again, that's part of the fun, I guess. Fourth reason we don't like gravel, it's actually a reason why we like it and why we don't like it, go figure, is that it can be really remote. Here in Montana, it's pretty easy to wind up on a gravel road where if something went sideways, you'd have to kind of self-rescue. That's not the case everywhere, but there is a chance for far more remoteness, where the margins of error if something goes wrong is a lot slimmer than if you're on a paved road ride and there's constantly traffic going by. If you're not used to that level of remoteness and kind of the self-sufficiency it requires, it can be a little bit unnerving. The fifth reason that we sometimes hate riding gravel is that it's hard to connect destinations. Unlike paved roads, which generally connect towns and cities and hamlets and services, oftentimes on a gravel ride, it just goes out to nowhere. One of the aspects that we loved about paved bike touring was traveling through towns and cities, walking through Main Street, checking out the shops and the coffee shops, all that good stuff. You can't really do that on a gravel ride or a gravel tour. Oftentimes the spaces and elevation between services can be huge. You'll just see nothing but dirt, your tire, and that's it. Which is great, we do appreciate that, but sometimes we like to go through towns as well. What do you guys think of the list? Do you guys agree or disagree? Is there something I missed? Am I completely wrong? Let me know in the comments below. I'm sure you already have. Thanks to the Pros Closet for sponsoring this video. Check out the links below for a discount code, and give them a follow on YouTube. They're starting to come out with some cool video content. As always, everybody, keep yourself upside down.
If I came and told you that there was just one thing you could all do which would make you more imaginative, make your memory better, probably improve your personal relationships, and make you a nicer person, you would probably be very skeptical. And even more so if I said it costs nothing, and probably everybody in this room can agree to do it. Now, you will probably have guessed by now that I'm talking about reading. There's a clue in the title. But I'm not talking about the sort of reading that we all know is incredibly important. That is the sort of reading we do for education, the sort of reading we do for administration, the sort of reading which we have to do nowadays just to get through life. I'm talking rather about fiction, stories, narratives. The sort of reading where you are reading things from inside another person's head, where it takes you right inside the character's emotions and feelings and actions, so you are seeing it from their perspective. That's the sort of reading which is at best thought of as pleasurable, and at worst quite often as a waste of time. I mean, I remember my mother telling me that when she was a child she was crazy about books, but that her father once ripped a novel out of her hands, saying that if you have to read, at least read something useful. But what I want to tell you today is that, surprisingly, fiction is very useful indeed, in ways that we probably never previously suspected. In fact, it's more important probably than any other form of reading. I have some new evidence which comes rather surprisingly out of the brain sciences to support that, which I'll come to. First of all, some not so new evidence. In 2013, there was a series of experiments. It was done by 2 New York psychologists, David Kidd and Emmanuel Castano. What they did was take people and ask them to read quite short passages from various types of books. Some of them were non-fiction books, explanatory or learning books. Some of them were sort of thrillers, plots, where you're reading about events happening in a story, but not very much about the people. You weren't inside their heads. And the third sort was the sort of fiction I am talking about, which is when you were reading things from the perspective of the characters. After that, the researchers got the people to look at a series of photographs of people with fairly strong facial expressions of one sort or another. And they were asked to judge from the expressions alone what they thought was going on inside those people's heads. This is actually quite a standard test for something that we call theory of mind, which is a bad phrase, I think, for a faculty which we're all, I hope, pretty familiar with. We've all got it to some extent or another. And that is the intuitive ability to see from the way a person is moving or expressing themselves what is going on in their head. It allows us to, just at least for a moment, to step outside our own heads and see the world for a bit from other people's point of view. And the same faculty, by extension, opens up whole worlds to us because it allows us to imagine what it's like to be somewhere else, doing something else, seeing it in a different way. And thus, people who don't have it are quite severely handicapped, particularly in social life. They find relationships very difficult, and more than that, they are limited by very limited imagination, because without that ability to step outside yourself, it's difficult to imagine anything, really. Now, you don't actually have to look at academic papers to see this effect. We're all quite familiar with it. I want to tell you about a particular thing. A few years ago, I went to a reading group, which was for people with various types of mental issues. A lot of them had very severe depression or anxiety, and they had come together to start a reading group. And I saw them several months in, when it was already having effects. The particular meeting I went to was, they were reading Wuthering Heights, the English novel, and had just got to this bit where Cathy, the heroine, had to decide between marrying either boring old Linton or this wildly exciting, tempestuous chap Heathcliff. So I just want you to see what they had to say.
Every Linton on the face of the earth might melt into nothing before I could consent to forsake Heathcliff. Stop there. And Faye, is this sort of state she's in something you'd aspire to? Would you like to be feeling what Catherine's feeling for something?
Definitely.
I'd love to feel it all the time, and I felt like that. You're like happy nearly all the time. It can last for weeks, months.
It is a beautiful idea in one way, which is I am Heathcliff. In another way, you get the sense that it could be very, dangerous as well. That sense that
She's married someone under false pretenses, really.
I can imagine it then from Linton's point of view. Imagine marrying Catherine, but then knowing that she's in love with somebody else. And he will. And he will find out.
I think deep down she should be with Heathcliff, isn't she?
Is he the one where she's sexually attracted to
so, yes.
and the passion?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's who she should go for.
It did seem to me, as I watched and listened to those people, that this quite simple act of reading fiction had really changed their lives. And in fact, in one case, it actually saved a life. I know that, as you will probably see in the end. I'll come to it. Now, the question that occurred to me was, what on earth is happening in people's brains to have this rather profound effect this pastime? So I just want to go over a little bit of what is happening in the brain. You probably know that our brains are made up of neurons, electrical cells, and that they join together to form pathways, which have electricity zapping back and forth endlessly. And that electricity, ebb and flow, is our thoughts, our emotions, and our feelings. Some of these pathways are pretty similar in all of us because they're actually built into our genes. Up here, on the left here, they're the pathways we all have, which take light from the eyes to the visual cortex at the back of our head. On the other side of the frame, you've got the connections between the two hemispheres of the brain, so that each side quite literally knows what the other is doing. Now, I just want to show you quickly the difference between speaking and reading, because they are very different. Speaking is something that, again, is in our genes. We already have those pathways wired into us when we're born. All you have to do is put a baby around people who are talking, and sooner or later they'll start to do it too. It's natural. But reading is not. You could put a baby in a library surrounded by books from the day it's born, and it would never start spontaneously reading. It has to be taught how to do it. And this is the reason speech has been with us for at least 100,000 years. Quite time for natural selection to actually get it wired into our brains. But reading probably only started about 5,000 years ago, and until about 100 years ago, most people didn't do it at all. So rather than being able to use those pre-wired, intuitive, if you like, pathways, every person who learns to read has to do it afresh. And that means making new pathways, individual pathways, the sort that individuals do make all through their life. Every time they have an experience or lay down a memory or a new habit, they create individual pathways on top of the basic blueprint. And that's what we have to do when we read. Quickly, when you look at a brain that's speaking, it is fairly straightforward. The information, if you see a dog, say, information zooms to the back of the head, visual cortex, then it sort of chunks forward. As it chunks forward, it picks up memories of what it's looking at until by the time it gets to that blue area, which is the first of the major language areas, it is then able to put a word to it. And then it gets jogged on again to that next, the red area, brokers, and that's where we remember how to say it. Quite literally, the motor area, which is that green stripe, is then instructed to send the instructions to our lips and our tongues to actually make the word. That's how speaking works. And as I say, it's natural, those pathways are there already. But reading is a very different kettle of fish. When we see abstract symbols written down, our brain has to do far more work. It actually has to, when we're learning to read, we have to create all those new connections in many, many different parts of the brain. You can see the red bits are the lit-up bits. You can see these aren't clear, easy, one-track pathways. These are really complicated networks that are being formed in the brain when we read. So your brain is doing a lot more work. It's connecting far more parts. If you like, it's a more holistic experience. It forces you to use parts of the brain that aren't usually used. More than that, one reason why it's so widespread is that when we read things about somebody doing something, they run for their life, or they're screaming, or they're frightened, what happens in the brain of the reader is that those same bits of the brain that would be active if they were doing it themselves become active, admittedly not quite to the same extent, or we'd act out everything we read, and we can usually inhibit them enough not to do that. But basically, these are brain scans of people you can see from the little colour chart below. They're reading. The actual movement produces the pattern on your left, and when you're reading it, what is happening in your brain is the pattern on the right. And as you see, they are very similar, with the only difference being that when you read about things, it's not quite as intense. If it carried on in intensity, you would act it out. Because the important thing about reading is that you are not just learning what's going on in that person's head. You too, to a certain extent, are experiencing it. And there's a very big difference there. It's the same with everything with pain. If you watch or read about somebody in pain, the same bits of the brain that will be active if you were feeling the pain, will become active as well. And some people feel this so much that they actually do feel and report the pain. Same with anger, same with any emotion, same even with quite complicated intellectual things like judgments, moral judgments, and so on. Now, this is the new information, which has really only come out this year, which some researchers from Emory University in the States. decided to see if they could actually see inside the brain what was going on. We know already from the earlier work that people become at least temporarily more sensitive to other people's feelings once they've read a book or been reading some fiction. And these researchers decided to set out to see if this was something that could actually be seen inside of the brain physically. So they had students, lots and lots, I think it was quite a large sample, reading a passage of, it was a particularly engaging and exciting novel with a lot of inside character-driven stuff. It was actually Pompeii by Robert Harris, if you want to do the same for yourself. And they had the people read just 30 pages a night for 5 nights in a row. And they took brain scans before the people started doing this exercise to get a baseline of what their brains looked like before. Then they had them read, and every night after they had read a passage, they came in next morning and they had their brain scanned again. And every day there were differences. The differences, these are is a sort of schematic picture of where the differences were found, the connections, which, as the week went on and they read a passage each night, they got thicker and denser. And they are, as you see, all over the brain, not just in the language areas, everywhere. Basically, what these people seemed to be doing was giving themselves a really good workout. In fact, the brain scans looked more or less what you would expect to find if these people had lived the events that they had been reading about. They had actually lived an experience, and it had become part of the architecture of their brain. So, in conclusion, I'm really giving the same message, I think, as Delia, the speaker before, which is that your brain needs a workout as much as your body. And reading fiction seems to be one of the best workouts you can get. And not only is it good for you, but it's also good for society as a whole, because the brain is like a muscle. The more you force yourself through books to take other people's perspectives, to sympathize, to empathize with other people, the more empathetic society we will have. Thank you.
Have you ever found yourself facing a blank Word document, feeling so overwhelmed with the amount of research around you that you're petrified to the point of total resignation? You know, completely terrified of wasting your time reading unrelated and pointless secondary source materials, and you're so drained by stress and panic that you don't even know where to start. If that sounds like you, then congratulations, you're completely normal. I bet it's never felt so good to be such a conformist. I met a lot of students like this during my time at university, largely, you know, in my undergrad, but being totally honest with you, I really took my research skills for granted. You know, I was lucky in that I developed, you know, a proficient and successful research habit at the start of my university because of how I prepared myself during my gap year. You know, it wasn't until I started being frequently asked on YouTube, how do I research at university, that I realized that this was a problem. So in this video, I'm going to give you a detailed and in-depth guide into developing your research skills, you know, such as knowing when and where to start, you know, how to use the library to your advantage, and the ability to distinguish between efficiency and effectiveness. So first up, if you're someone who feels ashamed or unintelligent because of their poor research skills, don't. One of the biggest ways a lot of universities fail their students is in their insufficient or lack of research training. You know, what universities seem to forget is that research skills aren't something we're taught of in school. You know, in fact, most of us get through school exams memorizing the answers to particular questions. I know that I passed all my biology exams without ever writing a complete sentence. I merely bullet pointed all the keywords associated with certain questions in order to score the points. That being said, failing to fully prepare and coach students in research skills is a major oversight by universities, particularly considering our university is 95% dependent on individual research. A single 1-hour workshop in your freshest week is hardly enough to set students up for 3 or 4 year ventures. If you haven't been taught something proficiently, you can't beat yourself up for not doing it well. But you're making a positive change by being here, so kudos. As a former humanities student, the research skills I'll be talking about primarily revolve around written material, you know, rather than research consisting of consensus studies or experiments and like artifacts. I'll therefore be focusing the research skills tailored to students who are working on particular essay assignments, who either need to find a topic to write about or need help supporting and defending an argument that they've constructed. So here you are, ready to write your essay. After hopefully having read your primary texts and some secondary sources during your term, you'll likely have at least 3 or 5 essay ideas for topics that you'd like to explore, which means it's time to start implementing a research strategy. For those of you who don't know how to pick an essay topic, I'll have another video on this channel called How to Write an Essay, in which I will give you more detailed guide into how you identify potential essay topics. I'll either link this video above in the iCard, but if I haven't uploaded it yet, make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell to make sure you don't miss it when it's uploaded. Back to implementing a search strategy. On a piece of paper, bullet point each topic of interest and spend 15 to 20 minutes identifying and locating resources for each of these by searching keywords in your library catalogue, any journal archive database, or Google Scholar. I used to spend much longer doing this process, usually around 30 to 40 minutes, but looking back on this now as, you know, an older woman who is more interested in time management and efficiency, I would recommend sticking to 15 minutes in this process. See how many relative academic papers come up, and locate and take note of the ones that catch your eye. Don't read the essays, use the essay synopsis to read what the paper is about and determine whether it's valuable for your argument. Remember, this includes papers that go against your argument, not just those that agree with it. If you're conducting research in the library, make sure to ask the librarian beforehand so you don't waste too much time aimlessly wandering around the shelves. The aim of this task is to identify which topics have the most varied and accessible resources available. If a fruitful abundance of secondary resource material isn't found within the first 15 minutes of searching, scrap that topic off your list, even if it was one that you were really excited to write about. If you have a tie between certain topics, go and ask your lecturer for their advice. P.S. If your lecturer is interested in a particular topic from the list, it may be in your favour to write about it if they're the ones marking your paper. Just saying. Researching and writing an essay isn't about trying to be the most original indie academic who's about to take the department by storm with their totally genius and never before seen argument. It's about demonstrating a deep, insightful understanding of your primary text, not your way into becoming the next Alberto Mangal. So now that you've picked your essay topic, it's time to get stuck in without getting sticky. Start gathering together books and essay PDFs online that will help you form a compelling argument. Formulating an argument is a whole other video in itself, but if you'd like me to cover that in one of my videos in more detail, do let me know in the comments down below. However, for now, the key traits of a compelling argument are its specificity, its somewhat originality, usually an argument that is constructed outside of the box, demonstrating a student with independent thought, its defensibility, and its contestability. With all these points in mind, read through the essays you've collated for yourself and evaluate your resources, determining which ones will become your core resources. Don't limit these down too far, as a variety of resources will only further serve you in demonstrating the significance of your topic. But if you're reading a book on the essay topic, don't read the whole book. Identify which chapters in the book are specific to your topic and the angle that you're going to take on it, and only focus on those chapters. One of the biggest mistakes students make is only picking essays which support their argument, so make sure that you include some counter-arguments in your essay, to which you then construct counter-arguments to said counter-arguments. I used to find it manageable to engage with 5 or 6 secondary resources intimately, but I would say 4 to 5 is a good number for standard undergraduate assignment. I will be making another video on how to read research papers and essays, which will either be linked up above or uploaded, so please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it when it's uploaded. However, something I would like to mention briefly now, which will be covered in more detail in that video, is write your essay as you research. This may sound really confusing and scary at first, but trust me, writing and researching simultaneously is a major lifesaver. I won't go into how to do that in this video, I'll do it in the next one, but it's a fact I really wanted to highlight here, just in case people watch this video without knowing that research is symbiotic with essay writing. Aside from writing as you're researching, it's important to hold yourself accountable for researching effectively and efficiently. Once you get into the swing of research, it's really easy to fall down rabbit holes and waste a lot of time focusing on the wrong details. While spending a lot of time gathering research may sound like it falls into the productivity category, I'm afraid it's just a veiled, fancy way of procrastinating. Other common mistakes many students make are over-archiving. Most students use online academic journals to access research papers on their subject, but once they've found a couple, they may spend hours or even days trying to find every single paper on the same topic available to them online. This is basically the academic version of over-googling. You know when you have certain symptoms of an illness, and even though you're convinced it's condition X, you spend the next 3 hours cross-checking your symptoms across all the medical sites available to you, just in case. Stop. This doesn't make you mentally or physically any better, it just wastes time, and it doesn't utilize the knowledge that you have now. Same with essay searching. Only employing one kind of source to support their research. Many never consider that sources such as periodicals, newspapers, government documents, biographical resources, videos, experts, special collections, or other internet sources are available. Make sure you do. Start researching too late. No matter how effectively you strategize and conduct your research, starting your research too late will always produce an inefficient wealth of resources. Researching takes a pretty decent amount of time, even if your strategies are in place. It's not about rushing through and hoping that you can get through it quicker to get to your writing process, it's about productively managing your time to produce the best results, reading every footnote in the essay, and using every footnote to propel their research further. Footnotes and appendices are really awesome and useful to find related material to your subject if you're stuck, but please don't overdo it. You really don't have the time. Not knowing when it's time to step away. This was the mistake I always made as a student, even up until the end of my postgrad. As a bookworm, I love reading, I love researching, I still adore researching to this day, but over-researching is self-sabotage. The only way I counteracted my inability to know when enough is enough was to write my essay as I went along, so the word limit was my barrier. Or, conversely, limiting their research to 1 or 2 secondary resources. Don't do that. Once you've decided which 4 or 5 secondary resource materials you're going to use in your essay, lock them down, end your research, and carry on writing. You'll only know after your first or second draft of your essay whether or not there are gaps in your research. Every time you come across a gap, make a comment note in your document which you can come back to later. Unless the gap in your research is glaringly obvious and actually totally shatters your argument, only go back and research to fill in the gaps once you've drafted a submittable essay. You're not going to lose major marks over minor gaps, but you will lose excessive marks for an unpolished and totally rushed final essay. As you can probably tell from the length of this video and the total diversion of secondary videos within this video, researching for an essay isn't straightforward as we'd like it to be. But taking the time to really manage your time and prioritize your energy and focus can really transform the levels of your anxiety and stress towards your essay writing, as well as your relationship with studying and the final result. If you'd like more videos on personal development and effective time management and organisation, you should subscribe to my second channel, which is called 80% Effective, entirely dedicated to personal development advice and life hacks. If you're a student and you just want to know more advice on studying and researching, and also really like to learn more about literature, you should subscribe to this channel, where I focus on everything bookish and academic. You can also follow me over on Instagram and Twitter, all the links are in the bio and at the end of the video. Also, special thanks to my patrons on Patreon, which are all listed here, the wonderful people. They are supporting both of my channels and I could not be more grateful. I hope you found this helpful, and remember, until next time, books save lives, so keep reading. Pip pip.
If you're in a STEM field, chances are you'll need to read primary literature, also known as research articles. And unlike books, effectively and efficiently reading a research paper requires a nuanced and systematic approach. When I first started reading research papers as a neuroscience major in college, it took considerable effort and time to make sense of it all. But since then, I've read through thousands of papers, published dozens of my own in peer-reviewed journals, and can now crank through them with ease. Here's the system I use. Dr. Jabal, MedSchoolInsiders.com. First, determine the purpose of reading. Depending on the purpose and your goal in reading a research paper, your approach may differ considerably. Keep that in mind as we cover the following sections. If you're reading a paper as a requirement for class, like I initially had to for my neuroscience courses, you will be focusing on comprehension rather than on determining utility. You'll need to know the study hypothesis, the methods they used, the findings, and the limitations of their conclusions. As you proceed with your medical training, you will likely write many of your own research articles. After all, doing so is one of the most powerful ways to stand out and strengthen your medical school or residency application. In these instances, you are mostly referencing other research papers, and it becomes more important to quickly determine relevance and value prior to committing a more in-depth reading and analysis. You will also use papers as tools to figure out other papers to read by taking advantage of their own reference list. Now that you've identified your primary goal, it's time to begin reading. Not every section in a research article is created equal. Unlike reading a traditional book, I don't advise you read a research paper in order. First, you need to read the title and the abstract to get an overview of the paper. If at any time during your reading you come across a word or acronym that you don't understand the science most, but to biggest action in research, cross-section analyses, things such that print quite so you will begin to see you can check it to recommend any other. I'll see you all in that next one.
I listened to that video earlier today, so I don't really need it now.
Hey everybody, so in the months since I put out the Dionysus video, I've gotten a few emails from people asking about my sources and my process and all that jazz, and around the third time I had to answer one of those emails, I had a sudden epiphany. Maybe this process isn't as intuitive as I thought. So today I'm going to share some sweet wisdom with all of you who've ever wondered, how the heck do I do research? Now I'm going to start at the very beginning of the process, and it's probably not what you're expecting to hear. This may be a bit shocking, and I'd advise elderly members of the audience to take a seat first, maybe check their blood pressure before I get to it. You good? Everyone sitting comfortably? Okay, the absolute first step to any research project is Wikipedia. No, really, I learned this in university, from a real professor and everything. We all learned years ago that you're never supposed to cite Wikipedia, and this is completely true. Nobody trusts it as a source. It'd be like citing something you read off the side of a subway car. But what Wikipedia is good at is directing you to actual sources. Right at the bottom in that sweet little references section is a goldmine of all kinds of sources, and even better, the content of the article tells you what kind of information you can expect to find in those sources, and sometimes even what pages they're on. It's fantastic. You can get books, websites, translated primary sources, anything and everything from the reference section. So as you go through the relevant Wikipedia pages, any information that catches your eye will have a nice little citation on it. So grab that sucker and add it to the list. And when I say pages plural, I mean it. Pretty much everything has its own dedicated Wikipedia page, except for us. But that single page isn't going to be enough to get the full picture. You want to find every page that relates to the subject matter, important places, related people or groups, relevant time periods, stuff like that. Broadly, you want to get as much related stuff as you can, since that'll let you contextualize the subject. Learning about it in isolation only gives you a fragment of the whole picture. Get greedy with it. You want to know everything about this subject, and that means you don't need to skimp on the sources you pull together. So once you've combed through every tangentially related Wikipedia page on your chosen subject, noted down a list of promising sources and what you expect to find in them, that's when you enter stage 2, hunting down some sweet sources. So now you've got a list of sources you think will lead to more information, and the odds are good most of them are going to be books. So you can either check your local library catalog and see if they have the sources you need, or you can give the titles a Google and see if you can find them online. Legally, of course. Sometimes Google Books has a preview available, and sometimes it even contains the pages you need, but mostly you're going to be looking for ebooks or library copies. Now this advice all applies pretty much universally. No matter what you're trying to research, the process of finding sources is usually going to boil down to find a library or Google it and get really lucky. But let's say, for the sake of specificity, you're researching something historical, like a mythological figure, for example. In cases like this, you're going to need to start dealing with primary and secondary sources. Now, broadly, if you're studying a historical thing, the primary sources are going to be stuff that was written directly about that thing from people who were point blank on the thing or otherwise had first-hand experience with its thingness. The secondary sources are the stuff written about the primary sources, and thus they're at least one degree of separation away from the original thing. And the number one rule in any kind of research is you always want to find the primary sources first. If they still exist, they don't always. If you're trying to learn about something and you have the option of reading a bunch of first-person accounts of that thing, or a book somebody wrote about those first-person accounts of that thing, choose the first-person accounts. It'll take longer to get through, but you'll get a much more accurate perspective. No text is free from bias, but the farther away the writer was from the subject they're writing about, the more bias will be present in their interpretation. It's like in the giant n-dimensional game of telephone that is history. The actual thing you're trying to research is the starting person, and the primary sources are all the people right next to the starting thing who probably heard it pretty clearly, but all the secondary sources are from farther down the line, where you're starting to get garbled interpretations of interpretations, and maybe somebody along the way started actively messing with the other players by not actually repeating what they heard in the first place, and it's a mess. Basically, if you want the clearest image possible of the thing, you find the primary sources. Now again, purely hypothetically, let's say you're researching a Greek god or something, and you want to know what they were like back in the day. Your primary sources are going to be the myths about that god, or the hymns recorded in their worship. And even then, it's important to note that these sources were most likely translated from the original ancient Greek to English, and that translation adds a layer of bias as well. Really, for the sake of your own sanity, you gotta accept that you'll never be able to find the clear, unvarnished truth of the thing, but the closer you get, the clearer the image will be. But while primary sources will give you a good look at the thing in question, you actually do need secondary sources. Specifically, you need secondary sources that help you contextualize the primary sources. To understand the possible biases and factors present in the primary sources, you want to know who wrote them, and when, and what exactly was happening at the time. Primary sources let you examine the thing. Secondary sources let you examine the primary sources. And it's very important to do both when you're doing research. You can't just take these sources at face value. Trust no one. And you gotta be aware that the writers all had their personal take on the subject, and the more you know about that take, the more you'll be able to extrapolate what parts of the original thing they might have been minimizing or putting the spotlight on. It'll help you get a clearer picture of the original. It's also important not to shy away from credible sources of information that don't seem to fit with what you already know about the subject. If you're only looking for stuff that agrees with you, you're not actually doing research, you're just looking to confirm what you already think. But this is another reason why it's very important to look at the context for your sources to judge whether or not they're actually credible. If your conflicting information is coming from, I don't know, someone's unsourced Tumblr post, you might not want to assign it as much literary weight as the complete works of Homer. Context for your sources is seriously everything. I can't stress that enough. So you find the myths and the hymns, and then you find other versions of the same myths and hymns, and then you find some secondary sources talking about the authors of those myths and hymns, and you got so much information about this mythical figure and the people who wrote about them and when all this happened, and you don't know what to do with it. This brings me to the next step: bury yourself in notes. Take notes on everything. No, really. This isn't like class notes where you write stuff down so you can pass tests on it later. This is a whole different ballgame. If you're researching a historical or mythical figure, write down everything they did. If you've got accounts from different time periods, write down when they're from and who put them down. Anything interesting about the writer's lives, write that down too. If your general approach to note-taking is the same as mine, as in, oh, I'll remember this, I don't need to write it down, that doesn't apply here. It doesn't matter if you think you'll remember it, you want to write it down anyway, because this isn't about memorizing, it's about putting all your information in one place so you can deal with it all at once later. In your notes, you want to distill down everything you could possibly use from the original sources. You want to make it so you never have to return to the original text because everything you could possibly be looking for is right there. If you're writing a paper or something else that needs direct attribution, maybe note down some useful quotes with page numbers too, just to make your life easier down the line. This will leave you with a giant pile of information loosely connected to the actual subject at hand. And if you're wondering what you're supposed to do with this pile, break out the thumbtacks and string. Who's ready to connect some dots? Now that you have a huge heap of everything you know about this person, place, or thing, you get to start on the fun part, filling in the gaps. You have to take the mess of information you've acquired, organize it into categories, lay it all out, and start bringing the big picture together. This is where you get to be creative. You have all these static points of data, you just need to find a best fitting curve that connects all the dots into one coherent narrative. Basically, a thesis that all the evidence you've collected supports. It's pure creative puzzle solving, and it's gonna be great. By the way, if there was any justice in the world, this is what high school English teachers would tell you when they assign essays. But since they almost always make you figure out the thesis statement first, they basically flip the whole process upside down by making you figure out the big picture rundown before you get any actual evidence. It's dumb. Don't do that. So once you've constructed your thesis out of thumbtacks and yarn, you just gotta polish it up to be presentable. That's a whole nother video Blue already did, so if you're curious, go ahead and check that out. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some conspiracies to unearth. Later. Oh god.
The methodology chapter is one of the most important part of your thesis. It allows readers to evaluate the reliability and validity of the research. In this video, you'll learn how to write a strong methodology in 4 simple steps. Hi, I'm Jessica from Scribber, here to help you achieve your academic goals. Step 1. Explain your methodological approach. What was your research problem and what type of data did you need to answer it? Did you aim to describe the characteristics of something, to gain more in-depth understanding of a topic, or to establish a cause and effect?
Clearly I couldn't hold off on one sprint at least.
How to collect to achieve that aim?
But that's it.
Quantitative data, which is expressed in
I'll keep it slow. Finish that last 15k.
Did you collect primary data by yourself, or use secondary data that was already collected by someone else? Step 2. Describe your methods of data collection. Now you've introduced your overall approach, you can move on to giving full details of the research, especially methodology, sample, other methods, these particular limitations, or stick with them.
Hey, how are you doing? My name is Shu. In today's video, I want to share with you the best 10 apps and softwares for doing zero-costing note-taking method. The first app is Zedler. It has been around for 3 or 4 years now. I've used it a few times and had a great time with it. It's an open source and free software with lots of features for doing zero-costing. Also, it got integration with reference managers like Zotero, which makes a great knowledge management tool for students and academics. I like its design, simplistic and beautiful. It feels like I'm using Safari because it's got almost identical interface. You can have multiple notes open as tabs, which is pretty cool. Also, they have this button that shows you the readability of your writing based on some algorithms, which can be useful if you regularly write essays and articles. Alright, the second app is Mem. It's an app that I discovered last year, but haven't got time to make a video about. It's actually gaining lots of popularity because it's really well made. What's different about Mem is that most of your writing happens on the timeline. It can be anything you want to write about. For remember access to the videos you progress and adjust it. Called Rich Note at various reasons, the existing ones. Also, what's great is that it lets you. It's an open source free note-taking app that's quite resurfacing, making it nice, and I like to use it it's been a great. Probably the most popular note-taking app tool, better theme, and let you import Squintle differently. What I love about Squintle to this note, which leads to another note, might seem good to get you started. Alright, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!
Hey, what is up, friends and fellow anti-netters? It is I, Scott Shepard here, and today I want to talk about 3 types of notes. Now, you may have seen from a previous video I had 3 types of notes called excerpts, observations, and reflections. Now, I've iterated and really evolved it, so there's really 3 types of notes that I primarily talk about now, and those are excerpts, reformulations, and reflections. The observation notes are essentially what one uses to place on the bib cards. Like whenever someone is reading, you place your literature notes or bibliography notes on a card, and those are usually observations. So I don't really use those, the observation term, for main cards anymore. However, the observations and what I explained in the previous video, they still do exist. However, they're more pertinent for the one-step process of going straight from reading a book to creating a main note. But what I've been really doing lately, and I'm not saying I do this for every single piece of material that I read or extract, but what I've been doing lately is following the Lumen, let's call it the Lumanian process of doing a 2-step, where you go from book to bib card, which is a bibliography card, and taking bib notes on it, which are brief, observation notes or key term notes, and then converting it to a main card. And so, anyway, we're going to talk about the really 3 types of notes, the primary types of notes on a main card that go into your main box of your anti-net Zettelkasten. Now, here they are. Okay, I'm going to give you an overview. So there's the excerpt note. I created a nice little cute little pink butterfly to illustrate this type of note, and we're going to walk through each of them. Okay, but here's an overview. So you've got an excerpt note, you've got your reformulation note, and you've got your reflection notes. Okay, and I put notes because I've got a few examples though. maybe walk you through. Okay, let's start first with the excerpt note. Now, an excerpt note is you're essentially pulling out a quote, and I'm going to read through and walk through this with you right now. Okay, this one says, as one scientist observes of Luhmann's system, quote, the outcome is the reproduction of complexity by means of selection. That is, the paradoxical reproduction of complexity through a reduction of complexity. And you see that little one? That's like my footnote, and then at the bottom it says Cebellini 27. That's the reference and source from where this quote comes from. Now, under this, and Luhmann did this a lot as well, is, you know, and I have cards in my box where I just only include the excerpt, you know, because it's kind of self-explanatory, but what I did in this one, I think it's generally a good practice, though it takes a little bit more time, is that you explain in your own words what that quote actually means. So that's what I did below. You see the little arrow, it says, essentially you simplify a book's contents by extracting its most potent parts by way of, quote, selection. Then, by creating cards with your own thoughts, aka experiences, thus creating knowledge, you file and install that knowledge in the internet, thereby creating a complex entity that you can communicate with. So this kind of explains the quote. You know, it's essentially you are basically reducing complexity by extracting, you know, the complex material from a book, and then creating a more complex entity by, you know, installing what you've just essentially extracted and simplified from the book into a complex entity that is the internet Zettelkasten, which contains a ton of, you know, complex knowledge and materials. So that's what that quote means. That's an excerpt note. It's largely based on an excerpt, a quote, right? Now, let's go to the second type of note. Now, this type of note is a reformulation note. What you're essentially doing is you're IR there, you know, rehearsing the thought and stamping it into found more now, meaning I'm writing about. I say the problem with digital Zettelkasten structures of leaves linked together by vines. So what I'm making a point on is that, like, in
the Hammerhead Karoo 2, easily the most hyped bike GPS ever, and the great hope for breaking the Garmin and Wahoo duopoly. How does it stack up, and should you buy one? Well, after about 9 months of using one, I'm ready to give my final thoughts. Let's start with the Karoo 2's hardware, and it's my favourite overall package of any GPS, with nice slim profile, quite small bezels, a well-implemented touchscreen, physical buttons all around the edge, and USB-C charger. It's really hard to go back from a big screen.
There we go, we're back. But
so don't be afraid.
I'll watch those videos later. Just don't need them now. Somehow I also closed every window on each one, so I can only see sound now.
It's such a damn pain to use. Think about the Garmin Edge 830 and the Brighton Rider 750 as good examples of this, but the Karoo 2 is big enough to actually make the touchscreen useful. Setting up the device and navigating through the menus is nice and easy with the touch and swipe controls. Then when writing, I prefer the physical buttons around the edges, which are well placed and easy to use. The screen is also vivid and easy to read with plenty of data field options, really nice maps, and plenty of pretty colors. Not all is perfect though with the hardware. First, the touchscreen is completely useless if you're wearing gloves. Second, you really need to run the backlight at 50% or higher. This is currently on 100% right now, if you want it to be visible in the bright sun, and that really eats into the battery life. So I think 10 to 11 hours is a reasonable expectation if you're a heavy user with navigation and backlight on. And 10 to 11 hours is only really okay. It's sort of decent for a big screen, sort of flagship size GPS, but it's really not that good when you look across the market. My least favorite part of the hardware though is the SIM card slot in the back. I just don't really think there's a good justification for this spec choice when Bluetooth and Wi-Fi already exist and are ubiquitous in bike GPS units. A quick note on the mounts. I quite like the Karoo's out-front system with its slide and click, despite it looking a little bit weird without a GPS actually in it, but I do appreciate that they've supplied an extra Garmin adapter, which really opens up all of the world of options of Garmin mounts for you to sort of have a bit more flexibility and control over where and how you mount it. Overall, I really love the Hammerhead hardware despite a few imperfections. I think it's just a really good overall package. Next up, I want to talk about the user interface because it's such a refreshing take on how we use bike GPS units. The Karoo 2 is built on an Android operating system, had a major firmware upgrade in late 2021, and it really brought it closely into line with what a smartphone interface would be like. You have really simple menus with either a tile system or a swipe down with everything quite easy to find and logically grouped together. I never really found myself in deep menu rabbit holes like I tend to with something like Garmin. And on that note, using the Karoo 2 really shows how bad Garmin's menus actually are. Wahoo and Brighton are certainly better than Garmin, but Hammerhead have really crushed it for simple usability. From a living with it perspective, this is just a damn nice GPS. It's also really nice when you're out on the bike. There's bike profiles for people who like to tie different data screens to a particular bike with different sensors. You get an elevation tracking system called Kilometer, which pops up to give you data on noteworthy climbs on your route, and there's the standard variety of automatic features, battery saver, and a bunch more. Garmin's platform is still definitely the absolute king when you look at sheer quantity and variety of features. But I didn't really feel like there was much lacking in this except for Bluetooth uploading, which I'll come back to a bit later. It has just been a generally nice unit to live with. Next up is maps and navigation, and they're handled quite well overall with, your nice big yellow line and chevrons showing you where the route goes and plenty of warning over how far it is to your next turn. The maps themselves have plenty of detail, including street names, bathrooms, places you can fill up your water. You can unlock it and freely scroll around the map to see what's around you as well. Then there's the ability to download maps from basically anywhere else in the world, straight to the head unit. And I tried it with some African maps and it seems to work fine. There's also quite a few gigabytes of free storage in here, so don't be afraid to sort of load it up with maps and then just delete them as you need. Out on the bike, the big screen lets you have data fields and maps together with everything clearly visible, which is my favorite way to ride. I pretty much spend most of my rides doing that. Overall, maps and navigation really doesn't feel like it's behind Garmin and Wahoo in any major way. I do think that Garmin's maps are just generally a little bit better overall, and I think that Wahoo's navigation, routing, and rerouting is a little bit stronger than the Karoo 2, but there weren't really many times I kind of got annoyed at this like I have with some other GPSs. It's a good overall platform. Next up are the integrations, and bike GPS integrations with external software are something that's sort of become quite expected, and they are a little bit confused with the Karoo 2. Firstly, you do get a really good Strava live segment system, consumes all your segments and gives you a great dashboard so you can pace your effort and sort of chase any targets. You can then just swipe it off the screen if you want to ignore it completely. They do also let you turn segment chasing on and off if there are some segments that you don't want to actually chase at any given time. Unfortunately, getting routes onto the head unit is not as well implemented as this, whether you're using Strava or Ride with GPS. The fastest way to get those routes onto the head unit is to manually use a web browser, copy-paste the URL of the route that you've created into the Hammerhead dashboard, and then that sort of consumes it and makes it available on your head unit. And look, it's an awkward system, especially when compared against Wahoo's super slick process of just getting it onto the unit via your phone in no time at all. There's also a Training Peaks integration too, where you can copy-paste in your workouts in much the same way, but I don't use that, and I don't really have any thoughts on the sort of general training systems within this unit. I just haven't really used it. So those integrations are kind of there, but a little bit half-baked. I would like to see some improvements to bring it up to standard with what people are expecting from the other major players in the market. Speaking of half-baked, the Hammerhead Phone App isn't really a phone app. It only seems to exist to transmit notifications from your phone to your head unit, which is something that I hate, and I turn it off immediately anyway. There's no setup or Bluetooth uploading through the app, so to me it's basically useless. Direct uploading your rides has to be done through Wi-Fi, either your home network, or you can even hotspot to your mobile device if you really want. It feels really weird to not have a functional phone app or Bluetooth uploads in 2022, and I feel like Hammerhead were really expecting that SIM slot on the back to be the main link between the Karoo 2 and the internet, but it just ends up being a drawback of the system. I mean, who really wants a SIM card for their bike GPS? I sure as hell don't. From a market positioning perspective, the Hammerhead kind of occupies its own place with just a single product available priced at $639, which is the same bracket as the Garmin Edge 830 and the Wahoo Element Bolt with some variance depending on your local market prices. And I would honestly say I prefer the Karoo 2 over both the 830 and the Element Roam. I just didn't really care for the 830's hardware, and the Element Roam feels too expensive, especially compared against the Bolt V2. That said, I actually prefer the Edge 530 and the Element V2 over the Edge 830 and the Element Roam. Those mid-range devices just bring so much value for so much less money, and I always gravitate towards that sort of corner of the market when I have to spend my own money. And that kind of brings me to an important point. If you just want a great bike GPS with tons of features and for quite a good price, then you should buy either the Garmin Edge 530 or the Bolt V2. The Karoo 2 is for more of your tech nerds, the kind of people who aren't so budget conscious, are willing to accept the quirks that I've outlined in this video, and just want a really nice hardware and a premium user experience. And honestly, that's kind of exactly my demographic. I'm definitely going to keep using this even though the review period is functionally done, because I've come to like it. Even with all of its flaws, it's just such a nice experience to use and have out there on the bike. I'm just kind of too much of a tech nerd to take the Bolt V2 or the Edge 530 if I've got something like this available at the same time. There might be some instances where if battery life is a concern, I don't want to have to charge a unit during a really long ride. Maybe I'm bikepacking where I might choose those other units, but generally day to day, I'm happy with this as my sort of daily driver. Tying it all together then, the Hammerhead Karoo 2 is a strong alternative that does a lot of things really well. The product matured a lot between that weird brick of a first generation and this much more well thought out second generation. And I'm excited to see where they take this concept, especially now that SRAM has made an acquisition of Hammerhead. And despite a few shortcomings, I think that it is actually quite a good value premium unit, if that makes any sense. It's my favorite unit in the range between something like the Edge 530 and Bolt V2 and the top-end Garmin Edge 1030 Plus. I think this is the strongest unit within that sort of upper middle tier. I do want to acknowledge that this unit was sent for review by Hammerhead, but it's fully independent and all of the editorial control is my own. I hope this has been of value to anyone who's thinking of making a purchase decision. If you want to see other GPS alternatives, my channel is covered in different GPS videos. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to ride safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.
We are well into a new year, and with it, a new season of training and racing. Welcome everyone to my new series where I'll be documenting my training throughout the 2022 season in weekly vlog style videos. I mentioned that I was considering doing this kind of series in my recent video about my goals for the 2022 season, and the feedback from all of you was that it would indeed be something that you'd be interested in seeing. So here's how this is going to work. I'll start each episode off with a recap of my last week of training, going into detail on any key workouts I did. I might then talk about any new gear I've been testing and any new projects that I'm working on. I'll then answer a few questions from my supporting channel members, so be sure to pop those into the comments below each week. Finally, I'll give you an overview of my goals for the coming week in order to provide myself with a bit more accountability. I'm going to aim to publish a video every Tuesday morning. These videos are going to be much less polished than my usual films, but will provide you with a more real-time and behind-the-scenes look at my training and race preparation, as well as some of the travel that we'll be doing throughout the season. So let's jump in here to bring you up to speed on my training so far for this year. After running the Namib Desert Race in late October, I pretty much just did a bit of unstructured running throughout the winter, kind of whenever I felt like it. Some weeks doing more backcountry skiing than running. I've been going to the gym twice a week, working with a personal trainer, but it wasn't really until late January that I started doing some more consistent running and building up my volume before starting to follow a more formal training program again in mid-February. And I'm just coming to the end of my first 4-week block of scheduled training as part of this new program. This season, I'm working again with Coach Eric Carter, based in Squamish here, who I worked with in lead up to the Tour des Géants a few years ago. Eric is an exercise physiologist who specializes in working with mountain athletes and actually recently completed a PhD on elite endurance athletes at high altitude. So I know I'm going to be in great hands, particularly as I prepare for my goal race for the season in August, UTMB, which is a 106-mile race circumnavigating the Mont Blanc Massif. But first, I'll be training for a completely different race, the 7-day, 250-kilometer Georgia Stage Race, which is another event by Racing the Planet in mid-June, so just a few months away. It won't be nearly as hot as the Namib Desert Race that I did with them back in October, but it will be quite a bit more hilly. Nowhere near the elevation change of UTMB though, so the transition from Georgia to my last block of training throughout July before UTMB in August is going to be a particularly large challenge that I'll be leaning on Eric to help me navigate. He'll be prescribing me with about a month or so of training at a time using a program called Training Peaks. And if you want to follow along with my training, you can follow me on Strava, where I post all of my runs and workouts. So as I said, I'm just coming to the end of the first 4-week block of structured training here, which follows a similar format to what I'll be doing for the next 3 months. The focus is really on the weekends, where I do back-to-back long runs. Saturday is generally longer, and so far I'm up to about 4 hours, which is what I did here this Saturday, covering about 33 kilometers with a bit of climbing over a mix of runnable and some more technical terrain. I then did a shorter one on Sunday of about 90 minutes. I plan my runs based on time on feet as opposed to distance, but 4 hours on feet on the trails should translate into about 30 to 35 kilometers depending on the amount of elevation change on my route. But my goal leading up to Georgia will be to keep this as runnable and at as close to race pace as possible, so around 6 minutes per kilometer or so. This is actually going to be my biggest challenge, I think, because not only do I prefer to train in the mountains and to do a lot of climbing, but it's actually pretty difficult to find flat terrain here on Vancouver's North Shore where I live. So I'll likely need to incorporate a fair amount of road running into my long runs, and I'll likely be doing a lot of it alone. After my back-to-back long runs on Mondays, I take a rest day. I'll talk more about the reason for that in a future video here, but I basically never run more than 6 days per week, no matter what I'm training for. Tuesday is an easy run of about 90 minutes, which is something I do with a really good group of friends that I've been meeting up with weekly for years. So I'm looking forward to introducing you to some of them as well. Wednesday, I then work with my personal trainer at the gym in my first of 2 weekly sessions, followed by some kind of hill or speed workout. So far, we've mostly just been doing what Eric referred to as kiddie intensity to help me get back into the swing of things. Just some strides in the middle of an easy run. This week's workout included a bit of a tempo run as well. So I warmed up for 20 minutes, then did 10 minutes tempo, which is at what we call zone 3 or lactic threshold pace. It's not quite all out, but fast enough that it should be difficult to speak in full sentences. I then did 5 minutes easy, followed by a series of 5 90-second intervals at zone 5, so all out pace, with 3 minutes in between. And finally, a cool down on my way home. These workouts will continue to evolve and will almost certainly switch to being more focused on hill work as I prepare for UTMB. But in lead up to Georgia here, it's about both fitness and turnover, which is why I'm running these workouts on the road. Thursday, I'll do an easy run of maybe 90 minutes, although this week I cut it a little bit short to just an hour because I was feeling quite fatigued from my workouts the day before. And then Friday, I do my second session at the gym with my personal trainer, followed by a shorter easy run of maybe 30 minutes or so. So last week, in total, I ran just over 85 kilometers with just under 2,000 meters of elevation gain, as you can see here on Strava. The way these 4-week blocks work is that I generally build volume for each of the first 3 weeks before taking a step back in both volume and intensity for the 4th week in order to let my body recover. And that's where I am for this coming week. It's the last week of my first block of training, meaning it's time to give my body and my mind a bit of a break. And this is where the adaptations happen, ensuring that I'm ready to keep building volume during the next block. So I'm recording this today on a Monday, which I'm taking completely off. And tomorrow I'll do a 90-minute easy run on the trails with my usual Tuesday night crew. Wednesday I'll hit the gym, and for this week, with it being a recovery week, I won't be doing any speed work, just an easy run of about 30 minutes or so. Thursday I'll do another 60 to 90 minutes easy for that usual Thursday maintenance run. And Friday I'll hit the gym again, followed again by just a shorter easy run. Saturday and Sunday will be my long runs again, but with it being a recovery week, they'll be a little bit shorter than what I ran this last week before we build again heading into block 2. June is going to come really fast, and I've got a lot of work to do over the next 3 months. My body is really feeling these long runs, and in Georgia, I'm going to need to run 40 kilometers or more 6 days in a row, including an 80-kilometer day. But at this point, I just need to trust that it will come. I just need to plan the work and work the plan. Special thanks to my channel members for the support. As I said, if you've got any questions about my training, please leave them in the comments below so that I can answer them in next week's video. If you haven't become a member yet, you can do so now by clicking the join button from a web browser. And I will talk to you all next week.
In today's episode, an exclusive look at Jimmy's road bike.
Actually, no, it's not, because it's on my YouTube, not an exclusive look.
A second ever look at Jimmy's road bike.
This is a custom-made, custom-painted alloy road bike, which is a prototype, a second version of a prototype frame that I have been testing. It is built up with the new SRAM Rival Axis ETAP 12-speed group set with Zip 303S, I think? Zip 303S wheels, fabric saddle on it, it's a carbon one. I've got one of them on my, basically all of my other bikes, and I was like, I'll get a nice carbon one because it's my new bike, why not? Carbon USE saddle, USE lights, which I've had for ages and really, really good. Acus saddle bag, Acus tool roll, which has the usual sort of stuff you'd have in it. USE stem, zip bars, which are the same bars I've got on every single one of my bikes, which are SL70 ergonomic ones. They're quite compact drops, quite compact bars, really like them.
Super narrow, and then you turn your shifters in as well.
This is why I nearly fell off my bike when I rode it for the first time in 2 months, because I've been riding 75mm mountain bike bars for the last 2 months. It was very, very weird. The rotors are 160mm front and back. Some people don't like putting 160 on the back, but why wouldn't you want more stopping power? Cassette is a 10, I think it's a 34. The chain rings, 4633, 165 cranks, and the Rival quart power meter. First time I've ever had a power meter, quite like it, don't know, it's just nice, like to have it, why not?
So this is the thing that a lot of group set manufacturers are now doing. If you buy a Shimano group set, you can get Shimano power meter with it. I think Duratex might even come with it as standard. If you buy a SRAM group set, you end up with a quark power meter. It's only really been happening in the last few years as power has come down in price and become a bit more accessible. How much more is it to buy this one with a power meter versus not?
That's a good question, Francis. I don't know exactly, but it's really not very much. Don't quote me on this, but I think that crank set with power is about 300 quid.
It's over £300 because I saw it on Google yesterday, it popped up as an advert.
I've got a feeling that when I bought that, which is end of last summer, I think it was £280 for the full chain set and the power meter included, which is bonkers. I don't know what it is now, everything's gone in price, so it's probably like 600 quid now or something.
On eBay from a scalper.
Yeah, it's not cheap, but what you're getting for that money versus a lot of competition, it's fantastic value. I personally think the group set is absolutely mint. It's the first time I've had an ETAP group set, and it's mint. It's really interesting seeing them be built as well, because it's literally just bolt it on, bolt it on, bolt it on, press a button, press a couple other buttons so it all syncs into each other, done.
Do you use an app?
It does have an app, yeah. So the app is you can check the battery, how much battery is on all of the components, update the firmware, which takes literally seconds. You can configure how you want the shifting to work. For me to change the front mechs, I press both the shifters up and down. You can change it to, do they call it sequential? Where it's just like...
Or synchro or something
where,
like that,
where you don't actually ever do the front mech, and you just go through the gears and it automatically adjusts the front. So it's basically...
up and down.
24 gears in a line, and it knows how to do all of the shifting.
I don't like that feature.
That's horrible.
But it's because we've been riding bikes for a long time. If someone was new, then maybe it would be handy.
But we do ride one bike a lot, so it's basically one bike. Is it not turning two bike into one bike?
It's one bike for two bike people.
The gear ratios on this, I think, are technically like gravel gear ratios, because I was working on the basis of, we live somewhere hilly, there is never a scenario where you think, oh, I've got too many gears. There's always there's often a scenario where you think, I would like some more. So why wouldn't I want more gears? It's got a 10.2, so it can still go really fast if you want to go fast. It allows me to throw bags on it, throw the pannier on it. We toured Spain in it. A bit.
In
the pannier. The gears are spec'd to basically just give me tons of options. I can use it as a fast road bike, I can use it as a touring bike, I can do whatever I want with it.
I've got a question.
What pump?
With the app,
yeah.
Can you connect it to other people's bikes and then change their gears or do their dropper posts without them knowing?
Nick has looked into it.
Of course he has.
I can't remember. There's a reason you can't do it. I have a Garmin 830 and a heart rate monitor. I bought it, can't remember when. It works really well. I wanted better maps, and it's like a good balance of having a really good map and not being absolutely monumentally massive. Which one have you got? You got that one?
I've got the same as yours.
Have you got the big one as well?
Chris has got the big one.
It's very big.
It's very big, yeah.
Very good, because it's good to have, I remember when we were in Spain, there was a couple of months I could do it a little bit bigger.
Yeah, if you're doing trips where you're away, I think it's really handy having that sort of thing. But here, where we actually already know where we are because we live here.
Bear in mind, we stopped 3 times today to work out where we were.
Oh, if we'd have had the big Garmin, we wouldn't have had that problem.
Magic Silka pump, which everyone in the world loves. Indulgent, over the top, unnecessary, but beautiful. So the paint, one of mine and Francis's friends, who's also a tattoo artist, he's also done some Acus designs for us as well in the past. Inspired by, there's an illustrator called Sam Dunn, she's wicked. She did a bike for Spoon Custom, a white base with black illustration on the top. And I always wanted something like that, and this was an opportunity just to go wild with something. So I said to Scott, I want you to draw all over frame, and he was like, yeah, I'll give it a go, you know what he's like, he's up for anything. The first time we did it, because there's 2 attempts, I decided I wanted it on the raw alloy, so it would be like a silver base with then black illustration over the top. It took him about 20 hours, looked absolutely fantastic. Brought it back to me at the office, it was like, it's a bit delicate, I'm not sure it's going to work. I'm like, that's a lot of illustration, a lot of hours of illustration for it to maybe not work. Took it across the road, if you remember, across the road from our old office was a paint sprayer to lacquer it, and he was just like, yeah, it's not going to work.
It all rubbed off.
Like, it just rubbed straight off. So then I said to Scott, do you think you want to do it again, but on a white base? He said yes. And this time it took 30 hours, put a white base on it himself. Did it again, similar but a bit different, and then we actually got it then probably white lacquered over the top. And this is the finished product. I basically just said, these are some things I kind of like, have a play with it, see what you get.
Bella.
And yeah, Bella's in there as well. I like that. That's why that's one of the things I like.
And possess clowns.
This bike...
Is that an upside down cross?
It is, yeah. This bike symbolises like a transition for me. It's the first bike I've ever built that I haven't thought about like, oh, I could do this and it'll be a bit lighter. Oh, I could do this and it'll be a bit more aero. I'll do this and it'll be a bit faster. It's the first... I feel like it symbolises the point for me as a cyclist where I've gone, riding bikes is just that. It's for riding bikes and enjoying stuff. The heaviest bike I've possibly ever owned, just under 9 kilos with nothing on it.
That's not that bad, is it?
It's not light.
It's still a light bike.
Compared to the stuff that's around. Like your bike with the tail fin on is probably lighter than this, not with the 4 cameras you've got in it. If you take the cameras out, that bike with the tail fin on is probably still lighter than this. But you don't notice it when you're riding it. It's unbelievably enjoyable to ride. It's like, it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's fast, it's nippy. And that, like, for me, the thing that's always really good about bikes is that they're like a bit like tweaky, a bit fun. You know, you accelerate and they actually move a little bit. And that's what's fun. And you get loads of gears and it doesn't matter how heavy the bike is. Which is also why I don't shave my legs anymore, because I'm a different breed of cyclist than I was 5 years ago.
What kind of breed?
Just like cyclist, whereas you're like a roadie.
Like my solution for carrying this. Tail fin, not just for bike packing. Convenient when you need to do a bike ride with a cinema camera. Yeah. Fairly niche. Fairly niche use.
So there's Screamy Lady.
Tony's cyclocross bike. This is
Tony's trusted me with this bike. He said, whatever you do, let Jimmy ride it.
This is a championship winning bike, isn't it? He's like a legit racer.
World champs.
He's not world champ, is it?
He came third in the world champs.
Old man world champs.
We've got to do a shout out.
I don't know if we want to do it yet. It might be a bit too soon because there's only 2 bike builds on there. One of them is literally the bike that everyone would have just looked at for the last, how long's the video going to be? 4 minutes, 5 minutes?
Jimmy started a YouTube channel, and on this YouTube channel there's going to be bike builds, and there already is some, amongst other things. So if you want to subscribe to his channel, link down below, and there'll be more bike builds on there, because you're going to be spending a lot of time there. I think it's just an excuse to eat pizza with Nick.
It very much is, yeah. The plan is to do 1 bike build video, or at least post 1 bike build video a week.
A week?
Forever. I've got into this because I want to be consistent. I've got 2 more in the bank anyway, so I've got the next 2 weeks sorted, so I can just retire now. Done, completed.
Big wave, big wave! Go, go, go! Go, go, go! Today is the day. The GoPro Hero 10 is being released. The much talked about, the much rumored GoPro. The GoPro that feels like GoPro needs to nail it with this camera. Today's the day. And I finally got on GoPro's press list, so they sent me one 2 weeks ago. So I've been playing with it, I've been testing it out, I've been doing pretty much everything I can imagine with this camera so that I can show you guys what's new, what's different with the GoPro Hero 10, especially versus the GoPro Hero 9. It seemed like from the comments it's the main thing you guys want to know, what's new, what's different, what's the same. So there'll be plenty more videos on the GoPro Hero 10, but today's focus is really going to be like what's new from this guy. Why, if you have this, should you get this? Or if you have the 7 or 8, is it time to finally upgrade? Yeah, that's what we're going to focus on today. And today's video is sponsored by Epidemic Sound. If you guys are filming with your GoPros, if you're out there trying to make super dope, super epic videos, you need good music. And you need the rights to use that music. So if you just make videos, use random music, throw it on YouTube, you're looking at copyright strikes, you're looking at strikes on your channel, you might even get videos taken down from YouTube because you didn't have the license for that song. But with Epidemic Sound, for $15 a month, you get full access to their huge library of amazing music. They are the soundtrack for this channel. Every video that you see on this channel, the music is Epidemic Sound. And the thing is, like, it's a bunch of creators now. Like, a bunch of the creators that are kind of in my same sphere are all Epidemic Sound users. And if you're trying to make videos with your GoPro, you should be too. Music means so much to an action camera. When you're using an action camera, the audio's usually garbage, so the music matters. Yeah, go sign up for Epidemic Sound. All right, into the GoPro Hero 10 Black. What's new? What's different? What is the same? First up, what's the same is the price. $399 if you're a subscriber, $450 if you are not a subscriber. So they've kind of got that $50 savings if you are a subscriber to GoPro. Then as far as what it comes with, what comes in the box, you get that kind of sweet case again, which I freaking love these things. I've got like 4 of these cases now, and I'm very happy with them. And then inside, you get the standard GoPro stuff. You get a cable, you get a battery, you get 2 sticky mounts, and you get the GoPro feet with thumb screw, and you get the GoPro. All right, that is everything that is in the case that you get with it. First up, physically, it is almost identical to the GoPro Hero 9, which I think is gonna have a lot of people kind of saying like, well, what the heck? It looks the exact same, just the guts are different, but I'm actually pretty stoked on it. I am stoked that it's the exact same size, that it's the same lens, that it's the same everything physically, because that means that any case that you might have bought for your Hero 9, any sort of ND filters or max lens mod, the media mod, everything that you bought for your Hero 9 works with the Hero 10, including that 1720 milliamp battery, same battery. So while some of the rumors had the GoPro Hero 10 looking quite different than the Hero 9, I'm super stoked. For me, that's a total benefit that this looks exactly like this guy. Really, the only way to tell these 2 cameras apart is that the 10 has blue text and the 9 has white text, and then of course, it says 10 on the side instead of 9. So even while filming with these 2 side by side, I had to use different colored thumb screws so that I knew which one was a 10 and which one was a 9, because from behind, you can't tell at all. You can only tell from the side and the front. All other sides are exactly the same. One new physical feature though on the 10 is a new lens cover. This lens cover is supposedly stronger than the Hero 9, but also it has a new hydrophobic coating on it, so it repels water much better. So when you dunk these in water or you get water splashed up on the lens, on the Hero 9, you might get some of that beading issues where you gotta lick the lens and then dip it again and then you can film. On the Hero 10, it really doesn't stick at all. It's super impressive, and because they're interchangeable, I imagine I could just buy a a Hero 10 lens and put it onto my Hero 9, and then my Hero 9 would have that same hydrophobic coating. So physically, these cameras are almost identical. So what makes the 10 different? And it happens to be quite possibly the most important thing that could be different. The Hero 10 Black has the GP2 processor. See, the Hero 9 had the GP1 processor, and the GP1 processor came out with the Hero 6, and it was in the Hero 6, the Hero 7, the Hero 8, and the Hero 9. And by the time the 9 came out, they were just asking so much from it with higher resolution, higher frame rates. The processor just couldn't keep up anymore with what it was being asked to do. And for the past 2 weeks with the Hero 10, I haven't had any of those issues. First off, the startup time is about a second or two faster. When you just do like a quick capture, like something's happening, you go, oh my gosh, you pull it out, use quick capture, which just means you hit the record button, and it starts. That process is about 1 to 2 seconds faster than the Hero 9 because of that GP2. And 1 to 2 seconds might not sound like a lot, but when something is happening and you're like, oh geez, and you pull it out, 2 seconds means a lot. You could have missed something in that 2 seconds that you captured because it was a little faster. That GP2 is also giving you a much faster touchscreen experience. So as you move things around on the touchscreen, as you go into the menus, it feels like you're on your iPhone. Like it feels like what we expect because we all have iPhones now. So on the Hero 9, even with all the firmware updates, it's still just a little laggy. Like the firmware updates did a lot from when it first came out, but it's nothing like you switch back over to the 10, holy cow. Oh, yeah, it's smooth. It just scrolls so smoothly. And honestly, that's probably the biggest like user experience thing that I had on the Hero 9. And it was one of my biggest complaints, but again, it's because like that's how you use the camera. The only way to really dive into the settings, change modes and all that kind of stuff is getting into that touchscreen. And when you couldn't do it or when it would just fail on you or you couldn't touch the right, you're like, come on, it drove me nuts. And yeah, none of that on the Hero 10. And then another thing that the GP2 did was it sped up the frame rate on the front screen. On the Hero 9, the front screen, very low frame rate. But on the Hero 10, it's so smooth. It looks just like the rear screen. Like if you move the rear screen around and you move the front screen around, almost the exact same. And on the Hero 9, the rear screen is good, but the front screen is choppy. Again, all because of that GP2 chip. You need a fast processor when you're asking this much out of these cameras. But it's also responsible for a few other things. One is higher megapixel photos. We've moved from 20 megapixel photos on the Hero 9 to 23 megapixel photos on the Hero 10, which megapixels aren't everything in photography, but it does give you more detailed image. It gives you more of an ability to crop in later, and combined with that processor, it should give us a better, more detailed image. Then onto video, this has double the frame rate from the Hero 9 at almost all resolutions. So this is now shooting 5.3K instead of 5K, but it's doing 5.3K at 60 frames a second. It's doing 4K at 120 frames a second and 2.7K at 240 frames a second, which is kind of absurd. It's awesome, I love it, but 240 frames a second is really slow. And if all the resolution stuff is kind of confusing to you, you're like, what's the difference between 1080 and 4K? Does it really matter that much? I made you a little chart. This chart right here kind of shows you 1080 is about 2 million pixels total in the image. You jump to 2.7K, you're looking at 4 million. You jump to 4K, you're looking at about 8 million pixels, and then 5.3K, almost 16 million pixels. Moving up each time is essentially doubling the amount of pixels you have. And more pixels mixed with a better processor, it just means more detail in the image. For me though, one of the best things to happen to the GoPro Hero 10 over the GoPro Hero 9 is a new color mode called Natural. Essentially, Natural is kind of their way of toning down that GoPro look. On the Hero 9, we had flat, and then we had GoPro color. So two kind of extremes of the spectrum. I used to film in flat only, and then I would add contrast, and I would add saturation. And then later I got more lazy, and I would film in GoPro color, and I would just try to drop the saturation a little bit and kind of remove a little bit of contrast. And while I know it's kind of a topic of debate, every time I've talked on this channel, I've done a comparison about the GoPro, and I mentioned like GoPros are just too blue, like the blues are too blue, and the oranges are too orange. It doesn't look real. Plenty of you have come out to defend GoPro, saying that you love that look, you love those colors, and you can still have them in their new color mode called Vibrant. Vibrant is essentially what GoPro color was before, and then you come down one from that, you now have Natural, you come down one more time, and it's flat. For me though, and my money, I'm pretty sure all my modes will be Natural. I've tried shooting in all three of them, and Natural, it looks real good. A super simple stabilization test between Hypersmooth 3.0 and Hypersmooth 4.0. Honestly, at this point, I don't know how much better Hypersmooth and all the stabilization in these action cameras can get. Like Hypersmooth 3.0 already looks like a gimbal, so Hypersmooth 4.0, I guess just a little better. Come on up, let's quick run. Here's a little bit of a running clip. Hypersmooth 3.0 versus Hypersmooth 4.0. Very not stable. How is it doing? Hey, keep up, kid. Next up after that is linear mode plus horizon leveling. So before on the Hero 9, it had that linear mode you could go into where it's cropped in a little bit more, or it's more of a narrow field of view, but you have horizon leveling where you could turn the camera and the horizon would not move. It would just stay locked up to 27 degrees. But now with the GoPro Hero 10, you can go all the way up from 27 degrees to 45 degrees before the horizon shifts at all. It's actually kind of it's similar to what a lot of the other cameras are doing where they're sampling a larger frame and it's cropped in a little bit. So it's almost like a small rectangle moving within of a large rectangle, and you could move so far before you hit the edge. So that is all that is new with the GoPro Hero 10 over the GoPro Hero 9. Everything at least that's kind of the big stuff that matters. And in my 2 weeks of testing, as far as my cons list goes, it got shrunk significantly. Most of my cons that I had for the Hero 9, the bugginess and the lagginess, have been fixed in the Hero 10. The like 3 things that I can think of that are still on my cons list. Wind reduction, it's not amazing, but that's because it's an action camera. I kind of know that pretty much.
There you go. Thanks for watching. That was Tour of Watopia Stage 2. Just taking it easy because that's all I got. I think we're going to end it here. That was over my distance, which is like 27, 28K, but I usually call it 30. And I'm watching YouTube videos. Save that. Thanks for watching. I don't know about how my sound works. Looks like it's okay, kind of, now without the fans on. But that microphone I have, fancy one, just wasn't working. So, I don't know, I'll have to figure that out later. Have an excellent day.